Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about active listening and just doing a quick fire session on what it is and a few techniques around it to help you improve better working relationships with your teams and your families and everyone who's sort of important in your life. I'm very happy to have Tom Pickering and David Berkeley with me, and we're going to do a quick sprint and hopefully it's useful for you, and there'll be more content coming if you want to go do a deeper dive into the subject. So David, what does active listening mean to you?
It means not trying to focus on what you want to say next. For a lot of the time, people they're not really actually listening to what someone else is saying. They're just waiting for them to pause in breath and then start talking about whatever it is they want to talk about. And so that would be the first step. Is it's not about you, it's about the other person. And so it's really trying to understand their framework of the world. Some people have used this analogy before, where it's looking at the map and the terrain. So if we were to look out of our bedroom windows, we'd all be able to see, obviously, whatever wonderful landscape you've got outside your window. But that whatever we say about that is what we're seeing from it. That doesn't mean it's the actual view of the map. Or it doesn't mean that's the actual terrain that we're looking at. We're just giving our interpretation of it. Likewise, Google Maps doesn't actually accurately represent the roads that we're looking at. It doesn't show the potholes, it doesn't show the badgers, and it doesn't show the cyclists and whatever else. It's just giving a representation of it. And so when we're listening to people, what we really should be doing for active listening is listening to how they see the world and how they see things around them and why they then do the things that they do, and then sort of explain the behavior in that way.
Perfect. And Tom, what's your take on it? Is it something you employ a lot?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. Just to give it a bit of context of, as a leader, you've got hundreds of people working for you, and so what do you focus on? Your own productivity or theirs? It's an obvious thing to focus on other people. So, and how to actively listen? People use the words such as switch off judgment, be present. And the question is, how on earth do you do that? How on earth do you switch off your judgment? It's just, you don't have a judgment switch. Or in fact, some of the things that David just mentioned, it's not quite that easy to do. I think there's sort of three modes. I think that, there's coaching, mentor, and director. And I think we really talked about coaching. And the whole premise of it really is getting a head in the place to actually think, I do not know better. And from that perspective, thinking actually they can figure out themselves, which is quite unusual. And it's a difficult thing to do, but you only realize that by giving people the opportunity, I've noticed. So, and then if you need to switch from, into mental mode, which is more around technical support or specific support, you can do that. So the question is, how the hell do you do that? I think the first thing is that this perspective is that they can do it, Nick. And that then it requires you to let them to do it. It's also about what David just said about, not knowing better. We all have our own perspectives of things. I think as well, the other thing that I'm noticing a lot is that people don't care about a lot. Do we really care about the person that we're speaking to? That really matters. And one of the most practical things I think that overcomes what David just said, demonstrating my active listening skills there, Nick, notice that? Was actually looking forwards, not being wrapped up in your own mind, but practicing looking forwards to what that person's going to say next. And what does that look like? I think that looks like thinking, which is oddly enough quite an unusual thing. And I think the other thing is it's about silence, which is really about the ultimate giving and showing the ultimate love to somebody, where you're actually just stopping at the end of, and again, this is a bit of a habit, to stop at the end of when they stop speaking, and rather than jumping in, as David just said, with your own thoughts, you just say nothing. And after about 10 seconds, you can then say, well, what next? What's interesting is when you get this right, you notice how absolutely appalling it is to offer advice, right? And I've actively never offered advice. I try and avoid it. Because it's a complete waste of time, because people have to figure things out for themselves, Nick. So I think this listening bit, giving people the time and the space and the love to do that it's actually very rewarding as well, because it actually means that you don't have to know all the answers. And certainly in my early career, I felt as though someone came to me with a question, I'd have to know the answer myself. It's simply not true. In fact, from a turnaround perspective, it's the antithesis. Actually, the solution is actually about getting people to listening to people and giving them that opportunity. And the weird thing is, it sounds like you're going to slow it down, Nick. Actually, it speeds it up. If you want hyper rapid company turnaround, you listen to what people say and let them do things.
Yeah, it makes sense. And David, Tom spoke of a couple of his tips there. He uses through silence and allowing people actually to continue articulate their ideas. What else would you add to that?
Sometimes it's about going sort of, I use the technical term chunking. So sometimes it's sort of digging down on what they're saying to sort of ask more questions to get more detail. So a lot of the time, someone asks how you are, you say, fine. That's the general stock British answer. How are you? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm fine. But behind that, there's a whole load of information. So why is someone fine? Well, are they not fine? Actually, they're just saying that as a default answer. So sometimes we just need to ask a few more kind of questions to go down into more detail of what they're actually saying. So if they say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine to get this report done by Friday. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, can you see any potential risks as to why you might not get it done by Friday? Well, actually, and then you're getting into the detail. And so that's the sort of chunking down. And sometimes people get sort of buried in the detail, and it's a question of getting them to think a little bit more big picture. So instead of getting them to talk, they might be saying, right, this is the, taking you through paragraph by paragraph by paragraph of the report. You might want to sort of break them out of that cycle and ask them what the purpose of the report is, or what are the kind of key drivers of it, or what are the key takeaways from it. So I think that would be a big thing, is just getting the right level of detail around what someone's communicating, so that you're happy with the direction they're going, and you understand where they're coming from on there.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think that enables people to work through their own problem. And you often see that moment where someone is then explaining the answer to you, having that realization moment of like, oh, I can hear myself what I'm saying now, and this actually isn't the answer. Yeah. And I think coming back to Tom's point of not just being, which is a very male thing, I'd say, is just trying to solve problems all the time and giving people answers to stuff. And especially as leaders, we feel people come to us for answers and direction. Yeah. And the amount of times we can potentially inhibit that change in evolution through us trying to be a leader is probably fairly dangerous. Is that along the lines of what you were saying there, Tom?
Yeah, no, I think it's bang on, Nick. I think it's only when you get this right you realise how wrong you get it. When I run the winning thinking sessions, when I get the atmosphere right in a team, if anybody switches to advice, it just kills things dead, Nick. It's extraordinary. It's like flicking a switch. It's actually very destructive. It switches everybody off completely. It's so subtle, and so it's such an important thing to really appreciate. But our habits are very ingrained. We're MBAs are all about knowing the answers and information, etc., etc. And just to add something to what David just said, I think we get trapped in our own thinking. So one of the reasons, which I'm sure David, if he had more time, would have mentioned, is you can notice where someone gets trapped in their own thinking. So the power of actually, they can go down an alley and say, and give them the time and the space to stop, not jump in, and then say, well, what else? Okay, which is a very easy thing to say. But you put the boot back in there, and then they stop and think, Nick, and then you don't jump in. So it's this practice, because you can then, and then you can ask a specific question to try and steer. And this is where you have to be careful about not using your own judgment to steer them away from the trapped thinking, to break out, because very often in these situations, I can't do this, I can't do that, or okay, well, let's talk about that. What's stopping you from doing it? And then they said, well, well, what can enable you to do that? Stop, and to try and open up the options. Really, I think that's what good looks like, oddly enough. But it's largely keeping your mouth shut and sort of being a backseat driver in many ways.
Yeah, which is no easy thing, especially if you're meant to be perceived to be driving that team. David, what are the sort of tips or bits of advice would you give someone to sort of improve in this area?
I was speaking about this with a client yesterday, actually, which is quite interesting. I think probably one of the number one things would be is to always go into a situation where you're wondering why somebody's doing what they're doing, or you're sort of not understanding the behavior. Is the one of the statements I always get people to think about before they open their mouth in those meetings is everybody does the best they can with the information they have. So it's not, unless you've got people deliberately trying to sabotage your business or the team or something, let's assume that everybody's doing the best they can with the knowledge they have. So as the leader's perspective, if they're not doing the things that you want them to do, it's stepping back and going, okay, so what is the positive intent behind their behavior? And where are the information gaps that led them to that behavior? So if you can go in with that, that's going to radically change how most people approach those conversations. You're going, right, they're doing the best with the knowledge they have. What is the knowledge they're missing? We're actually sort of probably witnessing in the UK one of the greatest examples of people not actively listening in terms of the European Super League football debacle. And that's when the owners have just come out and made a decision and announced it to the world. And everybody's gone, nope, not happening. And that is purely because nobody listened. Now, the owners are making the right decision, but they're going, we're securing the financial future for these clubs for the next 20, 30 years. So they're doing what the best they can with the knowledge they have around the markets and how much they've probably all lost over the last year. But there was no listening and no engagement. And that has led to the sort of big fallout from it. So if you want to look for a really good practical example of what not to do, that'd be a really good one. And how active listening can go very wrong when it's not done.
Perfect. Very, very, very topical. Very, very emotive way to finish on that. As I said, guys, we're just scratching the surface on this. Right, these are hours and hours and hours worth of content and deep diving into strategies to get around this. But I think just highlighting today a few of the points to make you more conscious of how you approach things, like David's view of going and questioning why and how, and have you set the framework that is actually leading to the results you're seeing within your business or within your team. I mean, that's a great place to start any scenario, frankly. So if you want to explore this a bit more or understand like how you can actually engage with your teams better to work through this and work as a more cohesive unit and actually encourage thinking within your business, reach out and we will give you some pointers and get you involved in ways to maximize you and your teams here. Otherwise, short one from us today. Great to see everyone. Thanks for the support and we will speak soon. All the best. Goodbye.